coursetune.com with links to the recording as well. So with that, I would love to kick us off and get started. I know some folks have to jump in and out. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We know it's a crazy busy week and there's a lot of contingency planning happening, especially today as we head into the weekend. So thank you for spending time with us. So I'm Diane Weaver, and with me is Maria Andersen, and we are co-founders of CourseTune. And as Maria said just a moment ago, we did have several meetings canceled today, and so we decided, hey, why not produce a resource, not only for all of our customers, but for the community at large. So Maria is our special guest today, and I'm going to introduce her with her official bio for online education events, which she does nationally. And this is my chance to gloat on her. So bear with me here for a moment. Dr. Andersen has been teaching mathematics and chemistry at the college level since 1998, as well as writing curriculum for mathematics and developing digital products for learning. She built iPad games to teach algebra, launched the Canvas Network MOOC platform, built adaptive learning platforms used by McGraw-Hill, and worked as the director of learning design for WGU. While a professor at Muskegon Community College, Maria directed the week-long MCC Math and Technology Workshop for 5 years, helping faculty to prepare to teach online or improve their skills. Maria teaches at Westminster College, is an author, a speaker, a learning futurist, and the CEO of CourseTune. She holds degrees in math, chemistry, biology, business administration, and higher education leadership. We're very excited to present to you an hour of being able to hear Maria's fantastic tips for remote teaching.
Thanks. Well, I should mention one other thing that's not in the bio, which is that I teach remote classes at least 3 or 4 times a month. If I'm traveling, if there's weather issues, and actually in the other direction, when I have students that are remote, I would say even more often than 3 to 4 times a month. And I've been doing that for years. So I'm just gonna pass along to you what I do all the time to teach classes remotely. And I wanna start by just saying that we know that this has been kind of a strange week. And we live in suddenly new times. I wanted to start by just pointing out the difference between remote classes and online classes. Remote classes are mostly synchronous. They meet at scheduled times. They primarily utilize virtual meetings as their technology of choice. And they can really be used anytime during a semester. They don't have to be planned. Where online courses are mostly asynchronous, meaning that they don't happen simultaneously with your students. They rarely meet at scheduled times. They primarily utilize a learning management system, an LMS, something like Canvas, Blackboard, Brightspace, or Moodle. And online classes require careful curriculum and instructional design. It is not something you just dive into one day just for fun. And so the good news here is that we're talking about remote classes for almost every situation I've seen where we have higher ed or K-12 pivoting to teaching. And remote classes are actually not very hard to get used to. So I wanted to start with the analogy of the glass is half full and the glass is half empty. In this case, for this week, I thought we might need a wine glass. And the reason the glass is half empty is because you already drank the first half. The reason the glass is half full is because this is an opportunity to learn and try something new. And for once, your administration won't tell you, no, you can't do this, because everybody's scrambling to figure out how. So why is this an opportunity? Well, remote teaching should already be in your teaching toolkit. It should be in your tool belt. It should be something you can do anytime you need it. Remote teaching helps all kinds of students, and it helps you as well. Students who are away for sports, students who are on field trips, students who are out of the country for a week. students who are at home sick, students who have cars that have broken down, who suddenly have to care for a parent or child at home. Any student who can't make it to class can be brought into your class with remote teaching, just the same way that you would remote teach to an entire class. This is why I end up using it all the time. If a student lets me know they're not going to be in class, I just record the class for them and we remote teach that day. We bring them in simultaneously. They participate in discussions with other students, and it just works really, really, really well. This is great for students. They love it. They love that there's an opportunity to still attend class when they can't be there in person. Another opportunity we have here for remote teaching is that we can move to new types of assessment. And assessment is really more than tests. And if you've been thinking for a while that you needed to start considering other forms of assessment, this is kind of that opportunity to do so, because you're going to have to think a little bit differently about assessment to do this all remote. Last, I thought I would point out that you have the pressure to change. And like, I'm a busy educator, most of you are busy educators, and you probably know what I do, which is that nothing happens unless there is a deadline. And suddenly we all have the pressure to change and not much option to resist it. And so consider this that pressure to change. You probably don't have to prepare for a conference talk that you were going to do. Now you're going to prepare for remote teaching instead. And from this moment on, you will have the tools to do it. So remote teaching is actually very similar to face-to-face teaching. You can see your students and they can see you. You can have discussions. You can write on the board if you need to do that. Students can work in small groups, and you can use active learning techniques. I actually find there is basically no difference between remote teaching and teaching face-to-face. In fact, there are some pedagogies that work in remote teaching that you can't use in a face-to-face classroom easily. And so I'll encourage you during this to take advantage of those, and we'll practice some of those. And you might be thinking, but what if they don't pay attention? I'm going to broadcast my class to my students, and how will I know that they're paying attention? What if they don't pay attention? And I'm afraid to tell you this, but students may not have been paying attention already. You probably have students in your classes who have laptops and smartphones, and they spend a good deal of the time distracted not only by their computer, but other people's computers as well. Yes, they will be distracted remotely as well, but we have techniques for dealing with the distraction in face-to-face classes, and we'll use those same techniques for dealing with distractions in online classes, or remote classes, I guess I should say. So first, I want to talk about that virtual meeting room that you're probably going to be using. Now, you all have a variety of different platforms you're going to be using, and so you want to kind of go through a quick checklist before you start. You want to make sure you know how video and audio mute work. You need to make sure you know how to share your browser or share your desktop. In addition, it's good to know how to stop sharing your browser and stop sharing your desktop. You want to find where that system has a chat window that you can use. There is both private chat and public chat in these chat windows, so make sure you know how to use both and how to find it when it disappears off the screen, which will happen to you a lot. You want to make sure that you clean up your desktop, your browser tabs, and your bookmark folders in case you have anything there that might be embarrassing to show on the screen. For example, maybe you don't want your students to know you have an ulcer, but you have a folder marked ulcer in your browser tab. Probably want to change the name on that. There have been several cases recently of politicians being kind of embarrassed by things they accidentally showed on their screen, so don't be one of those. You also want to try features like raising your hands or answering yes, no questions. We have a raising hand feature in here, so why don't you guys go ahead and click on raise your hand and make sure that you can activate that. Awesome. We've got the hang of that one. So I'm going to go in or Diana's going to go in and unraise all those hands for me. You'll have features like that. You'll have features like yes, no questions. And just like I'm practicing these things with you, you're going to spend your first session making sure that your students also practice each of these techniques. Now we're going to practice sending a chat message. So I want you to do two chats. I want you to send a private chat to me or Diane and tell us what school do you teach for, and then send a public chat to everyone with what the strangest thing you've seen this week is. Now, one thing I do for students when we're going to participate in a chat is that I open the chat window myself and I say in the chat, hey, this is the chat. And that way it pops up on all their screens with the new chat and it's easy for them to find. Oh, I can see we already have some mistakes in here. The private chat is to me, and that's what school you teach for. The public chat is to everyone, and that's the strangest thing you've seen this week. Make sure you can use both of those options. I can see we have folks from all over attending today. Empty shelves is the strangest. Your iPhone first. Empty shelves is the strangest thing we're seeing. And again, make sure that you know how to do a private chat and a public chat. Your students will mistake the two regularly when they're just starting out. So you want to make sure that you can reply to a student, whether they've intentionally private chatted you or not, and that you can move yourself back to public chat because it's often the case you forget you've just done that. So if you send a private chat, best to just switch back to public chat immediately so that the next time you chat, you're chatting to all. Okay, so let's move on to the next task. Now that we've got the hang of that. Virtual meeting room logistics. Most of these platforms have preset logistics that you can use, and you'll want to just set up a room to use that has some features automatically checked off if you can. So for one, set your meetings to auto record. You'll have students who can't make it to your live meetings. You will forget 100% of the time to actually hit the record button. So if you can set it to auto record, do it. And if you can't set it to auto record, a good old-fashioned sticky note on your screen will do the trick to remember that you need to actually click on the record button. I would set your students for mute on entry to minimize the amount of noise that comes into the room. You can also do this in the panel after they come in. The host typically has the rights to mute students, so that should be no big deal. You can choose to set a waiting room or allow people to enter before the host. I let my students enter before the host because it gives them that kind of like pre-class meeting time where they chat with each other before I arrive, just like it's in the face-to-face classroom. So they usually are laughing and making jokes by the time I join them. They've been there for 5 minutes already waiting for class to start. And that again makes it feel more like the typical environment they're used to. You're also going to want to keep a paper class list by your computer to take notes on who's participated, what questions you hear, etc. It's very difficult to take digital notes on your computer while you're presenting. You might be able to do it if you have 2 monitors, but I actually find that even with 2 monitors, it's far easier to just have a class list next to me to jot down some notes about who has questions and who needs help and who's participated. And then last, check the scene behind you and make sure it's appropriate. I have some really funny stories about things I've seen in student videos. You know, they've got underwear hanging out of drawers and things like that. But make sure your own scene is you know, professional and will be appropriate for teaching. Okay, in your first session, you're going to set the expectation for all of your sessions. And so I don't want to like panic you, but your first session is important in that you have to do things like decide whether you want to see students on video. If you allow students to not be on video in your first session, you're never going to get them on video after that. If you want them on video, then suggest it in your first session. Ask for that to be the standard. If you want that, and I think it's actually a good idea, I think you want to emphasize that we're all living in kind of a strange time where we're not getting a lot of social contact. And so seeing each other will actually help with that. You'll feel like you did have human contact. And so that eye contact, body language, et cetera, is really important. You also want to set some policies about how to get your full attention from the students. Now, in a face-to-face class with laptops, we have a way to do that. If you want to demonstrate something or have full attention, we say, tilt the laptop screens. And so everybody tilts their laptop screen down, doesn't shut it, just tilts it so they can't see it. And you know you have their full attention. What I'm going to suggest for your remote classes is that you use something like stretch and watch. So for example, I would say, all right, class, let's do a quick stretch. I want to talk about something for a second. So, you know, like put your arms up, give it a stretch your arms behind your back. That's the other thing that's going to happen to all of us. If we're sitting around the house for 2 weeks, we're all going to get pretty stiff. So use this as an opportunity to kind of get a twofer on this. We practiced raising hands. You'll want to do that in the first session with your students. You're going to want to practice with the chat and all sorts of stuff that we do today in that first session. But most importantly, decide what you want to do about video. And I'm going to tell you that you shouldn't really have an option here. You're going to be on video as long as you have a video camera. And I know that that's like scary for some people. You don't like the way you look on video, but I have a secret to tell you. You look the same way in person. So, you know, if you're willing to walk into a classroom and let students see you, you kind of just have to get over this one. You can hide the camera so you don't see yourself at all. And so I think that it's just so important that they see your eyes, body language, smile, that you help them to feel calm about this. And set that expectation for them. So the other thing you'll want to do is have students practice unmuting to answer a question in that first session. So try by the end of the first session to make sure that everybody has had an opportunity to answer a question out loud. That's what you'll use that class list for, and mute themselves again afterwards, which you can do or they can do. Okay, now to the fun stuff, the pedagogical stuff for remote teaching. The chat panel actually has pedagogical superpowers if you know how to use it. So I'm going to teach you how to use a chat panel so that it gives you that pedagogical superpower. And this is called the 3-2-1 go method. And we're going to try it out. So here we go. We're going to practice. The question is, what gaffes have you experienced in a remote meeting? Select all that apply. I want you to type your answers into the chat window, but don't hit enter until I tell you to. I should probably explain what business mullet is. Business mullet is when you wear professional clothes on top, but unprofessional clothes on the bottom. Oh, I see some people are making the mistake here. It's the same mistake that students will make. Don't worry about it. We always do 2 questions when we start with this because we know that some people will mess up the first. I haven't told you to hit enter yet, so don't hit enter yet. And now what I'm going to do is say 3, 2, 1, go. Hit enter. There you go. And now I can see all the answers from all the students at once, right? And I can scroll through the list. I can see if there's consensus. Now this was a very simple question and not necessarily one for pedagogical purposes. I always do kind of a silly question at the start of the first session to get the hang of the technique. So now we'll do a little bit more real question. Okay, so again, we're going to use the same technique. It's the 3, 2, 1, go technique. So do not hit enter until I say go. So now I want you to tell me what your biggest worry about teaching remotely is. But again, hold your answer until I say go. Oh, hold your answer. Okay, now 3, 2, 1, go. Excellent. So many worries everybody has. I want to ensure you that I have been doing this for years and students do learn just as much this way. In fact, I think some of them learn more because 1, they can go back and rewatch the video for anything they didn't understand. 2, some of them feel safer asking questions in a written chat than in class. And 3, because of this little superpower right here. I'm going to ask you one more question. And again, I want you to hold the answer till I say go. What makes this chat discussion better than a face-to-face discussion? And again, 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, so the best thing about this is you see everybody's opinion answer at once, and that feels a lot safer to students. I've never had a student who didn't feel comfortable doing this because all the answers get shown at the same time. And so everybody's participating, everybody's sharing their answers. In class, what tends to happen is the Congo line of answers, where you ask a question, one student answers, and everybody else gets on the Congo line, right? And so here, what we have is the ability for everyone to have a nuanced answer with a lot of variety. You're not getting that Congo line experience that you might have in class. It's sometimes like pulling teeth in class to get somebody to give an alternate answer to the first person that answers. And so you've got a lot of bonuses from this. You can see who responded, you can see the variety of responses. The students feel more comfortable answering because everybody's doing it. Now there are like polling platforms and things like that in some of these platforms, but I honestly find that for most classes that where we don't have, more than maybe 30 or 40 students, this works just fine. The chats usually are recorded too. So after this, for example, I will get a full archive of the chat. I can go through and see who answered, see if there were any questions I didn't get to, etc. There are no FERPA issues associated with names showing up in this chat because the students, if they were in person, would see each other there and know each other's names. And if I was asking a question to the class in person, like, raise your hand if you think this is correct, they would all see each other answering, right? Also, there is no grade associated with what we are doing. This is a formative assessment, right? And so this is not a recorded student grade that leads to, their overall assessment for the class. I would use a lot of these kinds of questions in a lecture class that lasts a while, but we have some more techniques to cover. So let's keep going. Another option you have in some of the platforms is small group breakout sessions. It depends on the platform, so just inquire about the one you're using, and I'll give you two ways to do it actually, in case you don't have this particular feature. So you can do think, pair, shares in small groups in these classes, the same way you would do them in person. So think, pair, share, in case you're not familiar with it, is you pose a question or problem for the students to think about. You're going to put that on your screen, so that's going to have to be pre-prepared. They're going to jot down their notes about it or solve it on their own first. Tell them how much time they have. I usually set my phone so it goes off and they know it's going to come back, but I'm not kidding about that. Then you pair students together in small groups or pairs to discuss the similarities and differences in their answer and reach a consensus. And then finally, you bring them back to the whole group and ask the selected groups or pairs to share with the class what they have come to consensus about. So I wanted to show you what this looks like in the platform that we're using today. This is the Zoom platform. We're using the webinar platform right now, but if you use the Zoom regular rooms to teach in, that you get breakout rooms is a feature you can just turn on. It doesn't cost anything extra. This is what it looks like. You just open up breakout rooms, decide how many rooms you want. It'll tell you how many participants per room, and you click the button. It creates the breakout rooms and shows them on the screen to the student and says, go to your breakout room. And they click on their breakout room and they're there. Once they are in their breakout room, they will see each other and be able to talk to each other. And they can ask for help in the breakout room, which tells you somebody needs help. You can also wander between the breakout rooms and give it help and advice the same way you would do it in class. I find that students actually do participate really well with each other in these rooms because they're kind of just thrown together and they have to talk. It's actually quite a bit faster than what happens in a face-to-face class when you ask students to form groups, because there's no decision making involved. You're assigned a group and that's what you use. Now you can manually assign these as well, but you don't have to. Faster to just do it at random. When you're done, you just click, I want to stop the breakout rooms, and it gives them a warning that breakout rooms are closing in 60 seconds, and then they'll come back to you in 60 seconds. So all the breakout rooms close and they're all back to the main group. So that's a lovely feature to use. If you have something like the breakout room feature in your platform, you're going to be just fine with group work. I have a few more things to answer about group work, so give me a second to get there. Another option you have if you don't have these kinds of breakout rooms is to use synchronous documents. And so I want to show you how that works. So I want you to think for a second and just jot down on a piece of paper or in a notes window, how do you think students are going to be affected by this virus? And I just want you to jot down your own thoughts. I'm going to set my little timer here for a minute. You don't need to respond in the chat window, just on your own. Just write them down on your own. Okay, there's my timer going off. So we'll stop. You'll find that 1 minute that students are writing is like the longest minute of your life. It's okay. Do some stretches of your own during that time. And so then what we're going to do next is I am going to give you a link to a Google document. Choose the correct document based on your last name and go there. When you get there, you're going to work with your group for 1 minute to make a consolidated list with more detail on it, maybe a minute and a half this time. So go to the link in the chat that corresponds to you. Your group members will be there with you, and give that a try. I'll set another timer for 90 seconds. The links are right above this in the chat. Did I not send it with everybody? 1 second. To all panelists. See, I did the classic mistake there. All panelists and attendees. Thank you, Cheryl. Do you see them now?
Sorry, I didn't even notice that.
I didn't either. And that will happen to you all the time. Don't sweat it.
One thing that I learned this morning while we were setting up and waiting for folks is when I put myself on mute, it doesn't record audio on the recording.
Oh.
So that was good to know. I never knew that before.
Oh, there we go. So there's 90 seconds, so you can get an idea of how long that is. You can see if you look back at the Zoom screen now that I can watch all these discussions as they're happening. I just scroll through the tabs here and notice that I did not need any kind of breakout room to do this. All I needed to do was ahead of time, I needed to make a document for documents, in this case for the last names. You can have documents you use every time there's an exercise where students go to the same document. You can have them sign in to the document using Office 365 or Google Docs or whatever you use so you know which students are actually there. So there's a lot of ways to do this to collaborate with ideas, even if you don't have that breakout room attendance thing. I'm going to jump back to our PowerPoint here. And so I showed you that stuff in tabs. That was to remind me to do that. This is where I just keep a little note with, you know, the documents I'm using. I had actually pre-prepared that in my clipboard. So I had gone and hit copy So all I had to do was hit paste, but I can certainly just switch over here and copy and paste the links into chat. Just make sure you paste them to all of the attendees. Good tip. And hopefully your students will get the hang of reminding you if you've done something wrong. But it seriously happens all the time, so don't worry about it. They will mistakenly chat the wrong group. You will mistakenly chat the wrong group. It's fine. I wanted to address next the issue of how we can write on a board in real time in a remote environment. And I've tested a whole bunch of options here. I've tested online whiteboards. I've tested the whiteboards that come with various synchronous products. I've tried tablets, I've tried iPads, and I have to say, after all the things I've tried, that the simplest solution, if you are suddenly being thrown into this, is to just go out and make a $99 investment in a high definition USB document camera. This is the one I use. I want to show you how it works, but this is a lifesaver. It folds up really small. I'm going to show you in my video. If you look at my image right here, this is how big the thing is. I pack it in my suitcase and take it with me to conferences so that I can teach my class remotely, or business trips, or wherever else I have to do. Here's how it works. You open up the software for it. Make sure you are first sharing your screen, and then just open up the software, and whatever's on my screen is shared to the students. So you can see that over here, I can, manipulate things. We can talk about labeling, diagrams. I can write on the board, so to speak. So just the same way I would do if it was a whiteboard in the front of the room, or a chalkboard in the front of the room, or a document camera in your classroom. I cannot tell you how often this has come in handy to just own. If there's a snow day, or like say the school didn't close, but I can't make it to campus, I teach remotely using this to my students, right? So we have a lot of options to use once we have this. You can put your textbook here. You can put your manipulatives here. You can do a science demonstration here. You can write, you can draw diagrams, whatever you need to do. So this is a really great option for those of you who need to do that kind of work associated with your classes. I have not regretted buying one. I actually own two, one to keep at school and one to keep at home. Hopefully you have a department that would consider that a good buy and a good use long-term to help students who can't be in class. So that's the document camera I use. It's worked great. I've had one for about 4 years now. I'm still on the first ones. Just quick on logistics. Oh yeah, so I just want to say, yes, it does record, but you're probably already recording in your virtual meetings. You don't need to double record. But if you wanted to record a demo offline to use asynchronously, these do have recording options in them. They'll even do things like picture-in-picture with your recording. This one in particular will. So it's really, really a nice option. So just to make sure we have the hang of this, to use a document camera, you're going to share your full screen in the virtual platform and then open up the document camera app and just turn it into full screen. As soon as you do that, then it's displaying on your screen and your screen is displaying to the students. Hopefully that makes sense. One other thing with a document camera, I thought I would just run through the list of things you could do here. You could show the problems in a textbook. So you can literally just put the textbook under the document camera. It has zoom features, so you can actually zoom and pan on the screen without moving the book, which is pretty cool. You can walk through how to complete a particular worksheet or show solutions to students. You can share handwritten solutions, demonstrate experiments, or I use this all the time to teach math for elementary teachers, so you can use math manipulatives and show students things that way as well. Okay, now you might be thinking, okay, that's great, but now I'm panicking about what students are going to be doing. How will they share handwritten work with the discussions, with me, etc.? So first of all, in the discussions they have, especially if you move them into small group discussions, they're going to talk about what they wrote down. And pedagogically, isn't that actually a win? The fact that they can't just look over and read each other's papers, that they have to talk because that is the only form of communication they really have, I think that's a pedagogical win, personally. I hate it when students just like compare papers and go, yeah, we're done, right? So this is an opportunity for them to work with the language of what they're learning. But also, I'll just point out that there's actually no reason why students can't hold something up to the camera and show it to each other, especially if it's just to give a general idea of what their diagram looks like, what their drawing looks like, etc. And that works just fine. You will hear students in their small groups saying, just hold it up to the camera so I can see it, right? And that will be just fine for them as well. Remember, this isn't online learning, this is remote learning. So it's a bit different and it operates under a little bit different guises than we would do for an online classroom. If you happen to have a PC tablet, you do have another option, which is to try out Microsoft OneNote. OneNote is a really easy option for drawing on the screen and sharing it with students. You're gonna do it pretty much the same way. Open up your virtual meeting room, share your screen, open up OneNote, and OneNote will be showing on your screen, right? So then you can write on your screen and share what you're doing there. So that's an option. I have tried it with remote tablets of all kinds, ones that you hook up from USB, and I have to say, I have done away with about $600 in attempted tablets to use this $100 document camera instead. So I really do find the document camera is far superior than the external tablets that you can purchase. Excuse me. There are some other LMS tools that you could use for facilitating essentially what you do in the classroom. They are, so if you have access to an LMS, you could think about using things like discussion forums, peer reviewing assignments, if you would like to have students trade assignments in class and peer review them. There are video discussion tools that let students make a video to respond to something and then respond by video to each other. There are audio tools like that. If you're going to dive into these LMS type tools, then you really need to think about the pedagogy and execution. It's really easy to get these wrong and to have them just feel like busy work to students. So I would suggest that if you want to go this route, because you're straying now into more of the online type activities, that you get help from an expert or somebody who really understands the pedagogy about this. There's plenty you can do here without ever touching these LMS tools. So don't panic if you don't know how to use these. You can always add them on next month when you've got the hang of the remote teaching. So I did also want to talk about summative assessment. We've talked a lot about formative assessment, all of these activities where they answer questions in chats or work in rooms together and bring their feedback back to the whole group. These are formative assessments. Summative assessments are what we traditionally use to assign a grade in a class, right? So let's talk about that. Students need a way to turn in work just like they would turn in class. And there are many, many apps that will turn your phone and their phones into a scanner and convert the photos to PDF. Now, not every student will have a phone, but most students will live with somebody who has a phone. And so as long as they live with somebody who has a phone, they can use this option. If they don't, you can think about your educators who are used to dealing with exceptions. You will think of something, whether it's somebody lends them a camera or lends them a phone or they find an old phone or something like that. But this is honestly the easiest way. So you can use your phone as a scanner by taking pictures of what you see. I'm going to show you a short video of how this works. I use an app with my students called Cam Scanner. It's not actually the one I use, but Cam Scanner has worked pretty well for me, and it is free as long as they avoid the suggestions that you upgrade, right? I want to show you how this works. So I have a video recorded. It is the link that's in this set of slides, and you can use it in your classes if you want a quick way to show students how to use it. So here we go.
I'd like to show you how to get your handwritten work to the internet using Cam Scanner. So here we have some handwritten work. I'm going to press the Cam Scanner button on my phone. I want to skip all the upgrading to premium stuff, and I'm going to press the camera button to take a picture. So I'm going to focus in on my picture and take a picture. and then see how it says finish here, and 1 here. If I just go to the next page, take another picture, now I have 2 pages here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this. I see my 2 pages here. I'm going to click share. And then how do I want to share it? I've got a variety of ways. I'm going to choose to share with a PDF and press share. Then I get the option to send this file to myself in multiple ways.
So that's it. That's how easy it is. Many of the students who have used this option find that they use it with all of their classes once they learn how to use it. It's great for submitting things online in your LMS, it's for sending through an email, etc. By having them make things into PDFs, the file sizes are a lot smaller. And with the file sizes a lot smaller, they send through email easier, load into the LMS easier, etc. So I recommend teaching them how to use something like this. Students will need to have a low stakes practice run or two. So this, for example, is my practice run. I tell students, I give them a problem to solve that's really simple, or a question to answer that's really easy, like where did I go to school? And make sure it's a 2-page assignment. So there's on page 1, do this, on page 2, do this. And then I have a practice assignment for them to turn in. So they can practice opening the app and doing it without being stressed out about the actual assignment. And that works really great for getting their feet wet and making sure they know how to use it. I should point out actually that if you need to demonstrate any of this and you have a document camera, you can actually open up your phone and show it in your document camera and show them how to use a particular item. Okay, back to my slides here. I will give you one tip. Sometimes when you're using a document camera with something like PowerPoint, you will occasionally lose your cursor. Don't panic if this happens. Just escape or scroll up, scroll down, or something like that, and your cursor will generally come back to you. The cursor focus gets kind of trapped in one screen or the other. It happens. The first time it happens, it'll take you a second, but you just have to kind of manipulate out to seeing all of your apps and then back, and your cursor will come back. Okay, so let's talk about some proctoring strategies if you do need to give tests. One thing you can do is make sure that your proctoring strategy is time boxed. So from the time they download the exam to the time they submit is a set time. So like you can do that in some of the LMSs where they get a fixed amount of time. You can honestly just open up a meeting room like this, send the email with the exam, they all work on it and they have to send it back to you by the time the meeting is over. Work on something for those who cannot attend the live session, because there will of course be exceptions, but that works fairly well. You can actually proctor a test the same way the proctoring companies would proctor the test, by watching what they're doing. And most students are pretty kind of, if they're going to be honest, they're going to be honest. If they're going to cheat, they're going to cheat. And they were going to do that regardless of what technique you use. You know that when you proctor tests in class, students find ways to cheat. So I would stop worrying so much about that and worry about changing the type of assessment instead, which we'll get to in a second. Consider open notebook assessments, that anything they can write down will be allowed. And then time box the assessment. I found that the grades are pretty much the same when you do that as they are if you just give them a high stakes test. Turns out the students who know what they're doing can finish the test in the proper time. And the students who don't know what they're doing have written down a lot, but they don't know what it means and they can't apply it to a new problem. So, or a new situation. So you find that surprisingly, having them do an open notebook, not an open book, but an open notebook assessment is actually fairly similar. Students might not be able to print, so keep that in mind. They are going to have to see their screen to see the test if they don't have a printer at home. Many of them do not have a printer at home. So be mindful of that in how you craft your testing policies. And then I have also found it to be a reasonably good deterrent to just have students handwrite and sign a very short academic integrity statement. I would say no more than 2 sentences at the beginning of their exam that says, I am not going to use outside resources, etc. They have to handwrite it and hand sign it to remind themselves that that is the expectation. All right. I do want to point out here though that this is that opportunity to really rethink your assessment. You shouldn't use Googleable questions. And I'll tell you a little secret, you should already not be using Googleable questions. We live in a time with so much easily accessible information. Even if you lock down the browser on your computer, guess what? Your students have phones too, right? And friends' phones. And like, there's no way you can proctor as well as is necessary by yourself without, like, you know, fancy tools. And you shouldn't really need to. You can write better assessments. You can build better assessments. And this is kind of the opportunity to play with that with your administration's backing, right? And your department's backing, because everybody's figuring it out together, right? So don't use Googleable questions. I'm going to show you some examples of how to change from something Googleable to something not so Googleable. For example, in math, and science, we often ask these quick questions where there's like a, you know, one line response, one word response, one phrase response, like what is the vertex of the given function? Oh my gosh, so easy to Google, so many platforms that will give you the answers. Not so Googleable is to just say something like list 10 properties of the given function. Now they have to surface the right vocabulary, the right properties. They have to think through all the different properties they know, and they end up knowing a lot more about the function than just connecting a word to something they can Google, which is how they're probably doing their assignments. So that's one example. Another example is with things like definitions, like say the Googleable question was define the word integrity. The not so Googleable question is give an example from your own life that shows how somebody with integrity or without integrity might behave. So now we're applying the definition instead of knowing the definition, right? And that's a much better assessment question type, and one where all students' answers are going to be a little different. So it's not as easy to, like, you actually wouldn't have any desire to really text a friend to have them give you an example, because it would take too long to do it and it wouldn't be your example. So it actually just kind of puts a barrier in place for, like, even thinking about trying to get answers from other people. And again, one more option for science instructors, economics, finance, all of us who have lots of problems to solve in classes. You could say we need therapy, but we just have to solve lots of problems. We tend to write the question like this: solve the problem, blah, blah, blah. And the better way to do it, so that getting the answer is not where the assessment lies, is to just say, you know, here's the problem. The solution to the problem is this. Now explain to another student how you can solve it. And that's what they do on paper. They explain to another student how to solve it. So it's no longer a matter of finding the answer. It's a matter of explaining how to do the problem and get the answer instead. And when you take away the need to get the correct answer, surprising things happen in the breadth and explanation of what you get back in the assessment. So there's many, many examples of how to do this. This is a great time to talk with your colleagues about how do we change from Googleable questions to not so Googleable questions. And then your assessments will be better all over the place, not just for teaching remote. Here's another example. You know, what are the symptoms of COVID-19? I'm sure we've all heard the symptoms are coughing, which I keep doing because I need to drink some water. 1 second. So what are the symptoms? And we've all heard it's coughing, fever, and shortness of breath, right? Has everyone heard those symptoms? Raise your hand if you heard those symptoms. Okay, great. Everybody's heard that. A better question for this, and I'll ask Diane to clear this out for me. A better question for this is, I'm going to give you several symptoms. Patient has a fever for 1 day. Patient spends 2 days in bed, fatigued and coughing, a slight sniffle, continues to cough, and finds some shortness of breath when exercising. Now, is that patient more likely to have a cold, the flu, or COVID-19? Explain your reasoning. What do you guys think? Your answer can be, I have no idea, because I don't think we've actually been given very good symptoms here, but I mean, from the CDC, but this type of question requires you to not just regurgitate things, but think deeply about what the differences are, right? And so these are kind of some just distinctions between how you change, again, something from, you know, I can Google what the symptoms are, but that doesn't mean I actually know how to tell a patient who comes in whether they are at risk for having this. By the way, those were my symptoms, and I have been told by the CDC that because I coughed up phlegm, I don't have it. So apparently that's a symptom you should know about. Phlegm means you have a regular cold, not the COVID. Okay, so we're rethinking assessment just a little bit. I wanted us to just push a little bit further past tests, because everybody panics about giving tests remotely, but there's so much more to assessment that we could be doing here. And we do live in a time where it's super easy to access information. And so one of the things I've talked about in a lot of past webinars and talks is looking at the curriculum through this new lens of, do you need to know it exists? Do you need to be able to do it supported with help? Do you need to be able to do it independently? Or do you need to be able to do it forever? And there's a lot of information, podcasts, webinars about this. Diane can put in the chat a link to one of our blog posts about it. But really think about why you're testing something and whether it actually needs to be tested or just assessed in some other way. We could talk about this for hours. But I wanted to point that out because I want us to just think in the chat window for a second, and we're going to do a 3, 2, 1, go on this, just to make sure you still have the hang of this. What are the assessment alternatives to traditional tests? So type your answer in the chat window, but don't press enter until I tell you to. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Amazing.
I love it.
Things you can do, right?
That's
I'm going to
so
hope
amazing.
that maybe Diane will agree to whip this all up into a list to send out with one of our announcements afterwards with where you can access the video. There's so many great things that you can do instead of testing. I thought I would just list a couple of my favorites. Making a 5-minute, 20-slide presentation is actually really hard. It requires you to really understand the material. And in this case, we have slides that have mostly just images. Drafting a blog post, they don't have to have a blog, just draft something that might be a blog post for a particular audience. And they can all choose different audiences. You can write a memo, like a work memo, to persuade somebody of something. You can design an infographic. They can make a TikTok to inform about a particular issue. They can do a teaching demo for a topic. I use that a lot in my education classes, where they make their own video using their phone and turn that in, and I grade that based on their vocabulary, their knowledge of the topic, their correctness of the material, the flow of the video, right? They have to do it several times to get it done well. They have to really know it. So there's so much assessment we could do that's not tests. And again, you suddenly have this like opening to try some of it because you probably don't want to just give proctored tests right now. You want to give them something interesting to do. They're stuck at home, you know, give them something a little bit more exciting. One of the things I would suggest is that when you do alternative assessments, they're not going to be used to it necessarily. So just make sure to give them some agency in choosing either a particular of the topic or a format that they want to use. When you give them just a little bit of agency, the results are tremendously better. And then provide a clear rubric for the grading. And I would provide that up front. So like, you know, doing this part of, you know, for my teaching demo videos, for example, they're worth 10 points. And, you know, it's like 3 points for getting the math correct, 2 points for having all the vocabulary correct, 2 points for having good flow, right? I just write out a rubric I use for every video. And one of it is always correctness of what they're teaching. So that'll help them to ease into a new type of assessment, and it makes it really easy to grade too if you have a nice rubric. So that's always a good thing. Finally, recording videos. Just drop all the expectations that you're somehow going to record all your lectures. If you were preparing for an online class, yes, you would think about how to do that, how long they should be, what style they should be, what graphics you should use, how to caption them, etc. Just drop that. There is no expectation that remote teaching is the same as online teaching. In fact, we don't want you to have that expectation because online teaching does require a lot of work. And you're not gonna be able to do all of that work this weekend. You do wanna be able to record some short help videos where needed. So I'm gonna suggest you find some software offered by your school, or at the bottom of this screen here, I found out that TechSmith Snagit is free through the end of June to deal with this crisis that we're having in education. And so Snagit is a very easy recording tool, also very easy to do screen captures. I want to point out that sound in these videos is actually very important. So do a pre-recording to make sure that your sound quality is coming through okay. You'd be surprised by how much ambient noise there is in a room. You don't have to buy a fancy microphone or anything like that. Just try it in different places in your house to see what works well, what gives you good sound. You'll find that some rooms echo, some rooms don't. And a secret tip of all online teachers is, in desperation, go sit in your car and record the video or the audio, because the sound will be muffled from the outside world and it will be actually very good because of all the cushioning. One other tip I'll give you is that if you're recording a short video to help students, it is much, much easier to cut content than to splice two videos together. So if you're using something like Snagit, you can very simply cut things out. So just keep the video recording, even if you goof up, and then just cut out your bloopers. So finally, I just want to say you can do this. It's going to be just fine. Remote teaching is something that's very similar to what you do in the classroom. You're going to learn to use a couple new tools. You're going to learn to use a couple new pedagogies. You might even like those pedagogies better than some of the things you can do face-to-face, or start thinking about how you can use those same pedagogies in your face-to-face class, which is cool, right? And you know, we're here to help. I'm going to stay on the line here for a few minutes and answer questions after I have another drink of water. You can reach out to us. Diane will send out the webinar recording and slides after the talk. And we hope that that helps you cope a little bit better this week and get moving on what you really need to do for next week.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you all. I'm just like getting caught up in all of the thank you messages here. This is really wonderful. We have a couple of unanswered questions, but I don't know if yeah, maybe take a look. It seems like you addressed some of them, but it might be helpful to recap a little bit.
Okay, so first, is it possible to use a webcam and set it up with equipment to operate like a dock cam? I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I think it's probably only something you really want to do if you have no other option. It's not going to be as easy to use as a dock cam. The dock cams provide things like easy zoom in and out, panning on the screen. You can like do one touch focus and things like that. So it's far easier to do it with a dock camera than it is to do it with kind of like a contrived setup. So if you can afford it, or your school district can afford it, I would recommend just going on Amazon and buying them up right now. It'll be like the toilet paper run. Tips for asynchronous teaching. I think that we're going to be okay as far as the internet goes. Cell networks are another question, but remember, you can record. If you record what you do, then they can actually just download it and watch it the next day, not streaming, right? So students can download it late at night, something like that if they need to. Comcast has actually eliminated all of the data. Was it Comcast or AT&T? One of the companies has removed all the caps on data for the duration of the crisis, leading you to wonder why they have data caps in the first place. So there are efforts to do that. Comcast has a program to give everybody who can't afford internet plus equipment for the next, I think, 60 days to get them through this. So if you have students who can't afford it, or families that can't afford it, they're basically giving away the equipment to use and the internet for free for a couple of months to get us through this. So that's a good option. We can have another session at some point about tips for asynchronous teaching, but it's basically going to be the types of things we do for online classes. So if you just go start looking for tips for online classes, you're going to find a lot of the techniques there would work for asynchronous teaching. But then you are getting more into the need to have things like recorded videos. So then you'll want to, reach out to local expert for help, your instructional designer on campus, a colleague who teaches online, something like that. The dock camera is the IPEVO, IPEVO, high definition USB camera. You can find it on Amazon, and we'll send it. It'll be in the slides, so you can follow the link in the slides. And yeah, so this webinar that we did today, this is exactly what I do during actual class times. I open up a Zoom room. If we have students at home, they come in through the Zoom room, and I use the Zoom room in class and project my screen to the board, the same way I normally project my screen to the board, right? They see the students who are at home will be up there on the screen in a little panel. Students in the classroom are there. And when they need to do group work, I just hand a computer to somebody in the classroom and say, here are your partners. You're partnered with people who are online, and we all do it together. So it really, once you get the hang of this, it's really gonna up your game in the face-to-face classroom as well to be able to be this flexible for students. Other questions, let's see. Lab portion of class remotely, great question. So I think that you could use the document camera to do the experiments yourself. You could use that 3, 2, 1, go technique to ask them questions about what they think is going to happen next and discuss them. You could even say, you know, like, what do you think I should do next? Things like that, but always use the 3, 2, 1, go, so that everybody has to decide what to do next. So like they're all kind of participating together in like directing you what to do. I think that could work quite well in this circumstance we're in. I would also suggest thinking about whether there are little lab experiments you can have them do at home, or you know, have a couple students do each one based on what ingredients they happen to have in the house. There's a lot of chemistry of cooking, for example, so you know, maybe diving into some of the chemistry of cooking and having them think a little bit about that, you know, with the ingredients they have laying around the house. A lot of schools who teach chemistry online have things like micro chemistry kits and stuff, but I think that's too much for right now. I would just suggest using a document camera and walking them through things. You could even just do the experiment, but have them collect the data and complete the full lab themselves, right? Let's see. For multiple choice or time sensitive testing, you really want to talk with your institution about what's available. There are things that will like lock down the browsers. There are testing companies you can pay to proctor exams, but these all cost money. And so I would reach out to your institution to see what's available for that. Let's see. Does your college need to have an enabled and paid for webinar for faculty to use, or is it free? So again, reach out to your institution, see what's available. I do my remote classes in Zoom. You can get a free Zoom account and you can have a whole group of people in there for up to 40 minutes for free. So that's an option. You could do part of your class like in person for 40 minutes and then give them something to do at home at the end of that. And you can just keep reusing that for each class, right? So that's a great option you could use. A Zoom platform, you know, is about $25 a month. If your school can afford, you know, $50 for each teacher, or you can afford the $50 to just have it, you know, that's a great option as well. Some of the learning management systems have something called Big Blue Button built in, which can be used, or WebEx or Adobe Connect. So this is your time to reach out to an expert at your local institution and say, what do we have that's available? And if they don't have anything available, then you need to probably say, we need to have something. I'm sure that a lot of these companies are providing packages for institutions to buy multiple licenses at this point. I think that's the end of the questions in the Q&A.
Yep.
So there's a question about the webinar tomorrow. So tomorrow I'm going to address math and science specifically. So we will go over some of these tips tomorrow, but we will also have all of the examples be math and science related tomorrow. And we'll address specific things like dealing with graphs, doing active learning in math and some of the platforms that are available for free to do that. And just some more math specific and science, math, science, economics, you know, all those subjects that have to deal with graphs. It's a little trickier to do online and thus a little trickier to do remotely, but you know, we'll talk about it tomorrow with a lot of these same suggestions. The link for tomorrow's webinar, Diane, can you find that one for me?
I don't think I have access to it.
Okay, it's on Twitter. I'll make sure she has it to send out in the notes today. Okay. Or go find me on Twitter at Business Girl, and I've tweeted it this morning.
Yeah, Twitter is a great place, and that's also where we're going to be putting out the links to the recordings for this and everything. So I think we do need to wrap it up. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for Maria so much. Thank you so much for imparting your wisdom on all of this. And Zoom does take a while to process recordings, so it will be a couple of hours before I send out the Zoom links, but I put the link of the blog, and of course watch the Busyness Girl and Course Tune Twitters. Those will also have the recordings there later today. All right, thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everybody. Good luck out there.
Good luck finding toilet paper.